We're building a puzzle. Let's make it that we have a cube that moves on the environment. Now, eventually we'll make it so that the cube will only move when somebody's standing on a button. But until that happens, we need to let's just get a cube moving from the server to the clients, so that the timing is the same between the clients. Otherwise, we will have problems. I'm going to go back to my content drawer. I'm going to go to my folder, and I'm going to create a new folder called Cube. Maybe Cube Move. That's probably a better name, because we're going to make a cube that moves. And we're going to right-click, go to Blueprint Class, and we're going to create a pawn. And we're going to call this BP Cube Move. And let's open that. And the first thing we should do to this is add a cube. And if we save, compile, go back to third person, we can now go to the content and drag this into our scene. And my plan is, at least initially, I want it to, let's move it up a little bit. I want it to move from where this is over to the wall. Nothing really fancy, but I do want it to move. Now, drawing upon your past experience, how do we get something to move between 2 points? A patrol, just like we did with our drones. There, you need your points that it's going to move between, because you're telling it, the actor or the pawn, to move between 2 control points. And this allows us to create more complex control points, because we could use variables to tell it to go to a 3rd point or a 4th point. Anything's now possible. Well, you're going to create a custom event, and you're going to name it RPC Cube Move or something like that. And then you do that instead of your event begin play. That it's running on the server instead of the client. Otherwise, it would just run on one client. You create a basic variable telling it and set it as that same class, so that you can tell it what your next control point is. We're going to go over getting the cube to move inside the environment, because we learned a lot doing that process, right? Those of us that were successful, those that were not, you still are learning that process, right? Because we're learning all of it. And then we're going to go over the animation process. And then we're going to talk about getting those to replicate from the server, okay? There were 2 challenges for each of these. Some of them had more than 2 challenges, but there were basically 2 main challenges as we were doing. Oh, I should plug my screen in. That would be nice. There. The main challenge for the cube movement, we needed to get a cube to move inside the environment. We'll worry about adding a trigger to it later, but we wanted to get the cube to move. And then the second challenge is to get the cube to move from the server. And really, this is the challenge we're going to have as we're experiencing multiplayer in everything that we do going forward. We've got the challenge of getting it first to work in the environment, and then second, to get it to work through the network, to get it to work from the server. Let's take a look at our cube. What's the first thing that we needed to do for the cube? Well, actually, there's a lot of first things that we needed to do for the cube, right? Because there were a lot of things to get it to work. We had to set up nav points, or patrol points is what we called them before when we were doing our first-person shooter. But we have to have our nav points, and we have to have our nav mesh. If you don't have a nav mesh, it's not going to work. And then there was another little key that had to be added to our cube. I'm going to open up my cube. I'm going to go, well, viewport is kind of meaningless. I did change the color of my cube because I got bored with the white cube. So, but in our event graph, And I'm not calling it from the server yet. Just an event begin play. As Tanner was saying, you have to use event get play to get this moving inside the environment. We're not worried again about getting it from the server. We are using the exact same tactic that we used for our drone in the first-person shooter. It's nearly identical. One of the key differences to get this to work correctly, and I had this working correctly on my other system, not this system yet. I didn't copy it over. We do need to add movement. And notice there is a floating pawn movement that we can add to the cube. When I add floating pawn movement, it adds some additional capabilities, some additional details that I can use. And one of those is that I can turn it on so that it can fly. I believe I can fly. The cube can now, because we added in the ability for floating pawn movement. Yes, only the floating pawn movement allows it to float. Okay. Now, I read some, as I was troubleshooting trying to get it to work, I did read some settings where some people said, well, I just turned gravity off and it would stay at the same Z level or Y level as it was moving along there. Some people said that they got that to work. I didn't get that to work. So, but I found that once I added the floating pawn movement, everything worked pretty easy. Now, how many people use floating pawn that got it to work?
I was just curious, because for some reason with the nav mesh, it will dip below the ground level to, yeah, it's a little bit, it's just, like I said, it's the navigation, it's like, it would make a little baby arc, and so I was just kind of wondering if adding the basic pawn movement to it would cut it out, because it feels like it can't actually.
That is odd. You touch it?
That might be because of the overlap, it's reading the overlap.
Yeah, if it's reading the overlap and it's not correctly identifying it as the goal actor. If it was identifying the character as a goal actor, then it would stop moving. Yeah, no, you can't. We got to fix that. We got to get it working right. No, you can't. Yes.
I thought because we were moving it to a specific actor that it wouldn't have worried about collision.
But we're using collision overlap to tell that we've gotten to that actor.
We haven't necessarily set up a kind of, like in Unity, we can specify if it's a trigger with such, if the object we've interacted with has such and such identifier, then we could. But I think right now, so as it's set up, it's just, if I read anything with an overlap, then I'll...
Right, and it would depend, and that's an excellent point. If you were following exactly what we did on the drone, where we changed the drone overlap to actor, instead, I kept it in this one. My goal actor is the BP move patrol points. If you specify only the device that, or object that you want to overlap, not your character, and I would assume that that's what you've got. That on your goal actor, you've got that as actor instead of your patrol points. You'll probably have to delete your goal points out of your blueprint, change that to the BP patrol points, and then I think that problem will be fixed.
Just change the goal actor to the patrol point?
Yes. Yeah, your goal actor needs to be the patrol point instead of an actor. In drone, we used an actor because we were using it to chase the character. Does that make sense? I'll bet several people had that same problem. As long as we have the nav mesh, yes. Over here, that's just getting ready to do it from the server. Yeah, we're using the AI, right, and this does actually allow me to put more patrol points in there. I've kept my nav point Yours did? Well, it's automatically running between the clients.
The server is the thing, right?
No, they're both clients. Yes, no, I understand your confusion there. That is a very common confusion. And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about today, because I bet 90% of the class has that same confusion. And the only two that don't have that confusion had multiplayer before. They would have experienced this problem before and probably have forgotten. Right now, if I launch my game, please work. If I launch my game, I've got two clients running. One is in the editor, one is up here in the corner. Now, I have a listen server running in the background. Those are completely, I've got actually three different things running. I have a listen server and two clients. If my cube is running, which it's not, I've got apparently something still broken. If my listen server is running correctly, or if everything launched correctly, the cube would be moving in both clients. But it's running only in the client. There's no coordination happening from the server for that movement. Unless you are telling it to replicate to the server, it is not running in the server.
You shouldn't see it on those.
No, you would see it on both scenes, but it's running on both screens in the client, which allows, why would that be a problem?
So,
If you do something to, like maybe if you can offset the cube and move it, blow it up.
It's only reflected in
one.
one client. Exactly. And that's the problem. Now, 90% of the objects in this scene doesn't matter. They can run on the client, and that's a good thing. I don't want them running from the server, because the more the server has to do, the more strain I put on the server, and the more data that has to be communicated between the server and the client continuously. So I want to keep that data to a minimum. Character movement. Obviously, that one's important. Well,
I was just gonna ask, is that kind of how like certain like when you get a game on Steam and like you have to download like local stuff, you still have to play it through Steam? Is that kind of how that works?
that's kind of how that works, because every object in the scene is is loaded from the client. All of my characters, all the textures. If you play Fortnite, every time you load it, it seems like I've got to download a new gig of new things, and now I've got Mr. T and Sonic the Hedgehog or whatever character. All of those characters have to be downloaded to the client. The advantage of that, if I'm running a client connecting to a server, is that reduces the strain on the server. I'm preloading all of my objects onto the client. Other games, anybody ever play RuneScape? Remember that? Yeah. RuneScape, at least in the previous version, I haven't tried the newer version, when you started your connection to the server would start downloading textures, or you move into a new area, it started downloading meshes and textures to your local computer to display that, but it was all continuously updating from the server to the client. And it wasn't being stored there. When I stopped the game, and this is the problem with browser-based multiplayer, it's generally not stored, there's ways of doing it, but it's generally not stored on the local system. It is only exists on the server, and I'm constantly downloading meshes and textures and everything from the server. You see this very commonly in Facebook games. I know nobody has Facebook except old people anymore, but Facebook games tended to use that process. They would download the textures through the browser, because Facebook is a browser-based environment, to the local system and not run on the client, or not store anything on the local computer, because who's going to trust? As a multiplayer developer, we have to be focused on making sure that we put the least amount of strain on the server as possible. Now, if I've got a character, I need to know how is the character dressed? What differentiates that character from everybody else's character so that I can identify it? And we've already done that. When we launch our game and we hit the number 1 or the number 2, the server, well, first of all, the client updates the texture on the character. We send that information to the server, and then the server sends that update to all the other clients. When I change my client's clothes, my avatar's clothing, that updates is replicated through the server. Now that's just a button press, right? Because all I really replicated was that I pressed number 2 to my character, my avatar. And that changed the texture through the code that is on all the clients. It's a very low cost. It's a button press. A byte of information was sent. What happens when I add a gun to my character? Now suddenly I need to know where's the gun position, what's the ammo of the gun, what's the damage capacity of that gun. Starting to pull back in our first-person shooter stuff that we did. What is all of the settings for that? And I need to know the orientation of the character, where we are firing at, what do they shoot. We start adding bullets to it. Guess what? Bullets have to be replicated. Suddenly the server's having to keep track of every shot fired. That's a lot of data. Now, it's short-lived data. That's why we put a range on how far the bullet can go, a life, if you will, on the bullet. We don't allow them to just... I built a game once that was multiplayer, and I didn't turn the life, set a life expectancy for the bullets, and they would just start piling up and stacking.
That's how you fool.
It was bad. It's like, oh, I need to set a life to this bullet so that they didn't continue to accumulate in stack. You know, you could climb the bullets and jump over things. It was bad. So those are the types of things that we have to be concerned about when we're creating this multiplayer environment. What is the server doing? What kind of information are they passing? It's not that important right now, because we're passing within one computer, or both clients are running on one system. The information is nearly passed instantaneously. It's running a listening server in the background, but that information is passed instantly between the clients, because all the clients are on one screen, on one device. But as I'm passing that information back and forth over the internet, we've got a whole new level of complexity. How long does it take to the information to get to the dedicated server that's running that information? Suddenly I've got milliseconds, hopefully, sometimes seconds of delay of information getting from the client to the server back to the client. The least amount of data that I can pass, the better. It's gotten better with broadband, but back in early 2000s, World of Warcraft was able to be played on a 56K modem. Think about that. Okay, it was janky. It was bad. It was rough, but it could be done. The original Halo first-person shooter was played. You'd have 8 people fighting each other inside of a limited environment over the internet on a 56K modem. It definitely motivated a lot of people to upgrade to broadband. Oh, cable, yes. Yeah.
internet connect, like they would host the server on a client's machine, and then
Yes, and you'd put it on the best client's machine.
you can treat a client as a listen server.
Yes, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But yes, I'm going to show you how to set up your computer. It is running as a listen server. You could give your executable to somebody else, and then you could play through Wi-Fi or over the internet using your IP addresses. So, but before we leave to doing Steam, we will be doing that. But yes, you could set your laptop up or your host computer, since you're connecting through the internet, make that listen server, and then Ben could connect to it, or Lauren could connect to it if you gave the IP address to them so they know. Or now they've also got other tools out there like that list the IP address and you're just clicking on it to know who's hosting a game, a listen server game. Yes, that is very doable, and it's very easily done with Unreal. But yeah, we're going to cover that. It'll be fun. That's what I keep saying. Okay, that's a long way to say we got to be worried about what we're passing to the server. A single key event, not a big deal. Even shifting over to animation, having our characters dance isn't a big deal because I'm not running that from the server. The only thing the server is telling all the different clients is where the character's located, its XYZ location, and what direction they're facing. And then we just send, hey, press number 3, start the dance animation. And all the clients play that dance animation. Because why? Why can I do it that way? Why is it okay for me to just simply tell the client, start the dance animation? As long as I've got the location and the rotation of the character, which is being sent every update. Why is it okay? Let me rephrase the question. How critical is it that all of the clients are in sync on the animation?
Not terribly.
It's not important at all. That dance animation is going to last, 3-5 seconds? And then it's over. But if they're dancing, they're not shooting. If they're hopefully. They might be getting shot, but they're probably not. Yeah, it's a dance-off. It's a dance battle, yes. It's not a critical operation. We can just simply send the command, dance. Dance, monkey, dance. I like that song. It's a great song. We need to distinguish between what are critical operations that need to be sent every update from the server and what are one-offs. Just, do that. And when you get down to it, everything else that comes after this is just trying to figure out what needs to be run on the server, what needs to be run on the client, and what do I just simply need to send an update for. Sending that key cast that I press the number 3 to all the clients that we know which avatar needs to do their little dance is all that needs to be done. We should now have our cube moving inside the environment. If you've copied most of the stuff from the drone movement and included a floating pawn movement or some kind of pawn movement, and you put in a nav mesh, you should have movement with your cube, at least on the client. Let's stop right there worrying about the cube movement.